Syrian refugees living in earthquake-hit Turkey rush to return home as border crossings reopen.
Still not budging. The NATO Secretary-General urges Turkey to allow Sweden and Finland to join the military alliance.
Ukraine's President Zelensky says Bakhmut will stand firm against relentless Russian attacks, while Moscow claims its troops are gaining ground. Some 1,000 pro-Russian protesters rallied in Belgrade on Wednesday to decry President Vucic's call for sanctions against Moscow.
This is one of the border crossings the Syrian regime agreed to open so that aid can enter Syria and reach some of the areas affected by those quakes last week. And as you can see, trucks are not the only thing going in. Over there are dozens of Syrian families waiting for a chance to go back to their home country. Some have been saying they had been here in Turkey for several years, but that their homes here also got destroyed in this tragedy. Many say their priority right now is to go back and try to reach loved ones who may be wounded, who may have been lost in this disaster, and see if anything from their previous lives is still standing.
راح اشوف في قرايبيني صار معهم مشاكل.
سوريا بإدلب أغلبها زرار.
Jamal is 55 and from Idlib.
أغلب يقول لك زين يعني.
كويسة بس هلا في يعني بزلزال صار شوي خراب.
أما إدلب شندي كزارة أما صواش
Like most people here, Jamal left Syria for a chance of a better life in Turkey several years ago. Last week's earthquake destroyed the little these people managed to build anew, and is offering them an impossible choice between staying in a disaster zone or going back to a war. Annelies Borges on the Turkish-Syrian border for Euronews.
A haven of hope for a country with an overwhelmed health system. This field hospital was set up by French doctors and relief workers in the Turkish town of Galbasi to treat the wounded. People like this injured man who was caught in a coffee shop by the earthquake.
Kalktım, kaçayım dedim, duvar da vurdu. Duvardan sonra öbür duvar vurdu. Kaçamıyorum. Kaçtıktan sonra pencere, kapıya koştum, kapı da vurdu. Sonu koştum pencereye, pencere vurunca pencereden aşağıya atladım.
The flow of patients is constant, and emergency teams are not limited to earthquake victims.
On fait la prise en charge des patients qui ont des séquelles par rapport au tremblement de terre et la suite des patients qui n'ont plus de médicaments. Donc on gère à la fois la phase aiguë de la catastrophe et derrière la phase plus, on va dire, peut-être plus dispensaire, de surveillance.
Doctors and volunteer rescuers are working around the clock to help the local population, and some of them have personal ties to the country.
Du fait que je sois né en Turquie mais que je sois militaire français et de nationalité française, en tant que Français, je suis fier que la France puisse aider mon pays natal.
The help provided by the field hospital is crucial for its patients. Some 41,000 people are dead after the February 6 quakes in Turkey and northern Syria, while millions are now displaced.
NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg has urged Turkey to ratify the applications of Finland and Sweden to the transatlantic military alliance. Ankara is blocking their membership, saying the two countries need to take a tougher line against Kurdish groups it considers to be terrorist organizations. However, Stoltenberg said Stockholm and Helsinki were heading in the right direction.
They have removed any restrictions on arms exports, strengthened their legislation on terrorism, and Sweden is also amending their constitution and stepped up the cooperation with Turkey, also established a permanent mechanism to continue to work closer with Turkey in the fight against terrorism.
Turkey has said Sweden should not expect its support after recent anti-Islam protests were held in its capital, including one where a Quran was burned. All NATO members must agree before a country can accede to the alliance.
Russia claims to be making ground near the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut, albeit slowly. It is certainly inflicting damage in round-the-clock attacks there and on other positions in eastern Ukraine. President Volodymyr Zelensky has called Bakhmut our fortress, but citizens in the neighbouring town of Chasiv Yar are getting out, and minibuses picking up those who want to leave.
Трошки страшно, когда прилеты бывают, но и хочется отдохнуть от звука, все это. Внучку проведать. Там же внучка наша живет, куда мы едем, во Львов. Ну, мы надеемся, что ЗСУ буде за нами, победять отих урків усіх, повбивають їх, і ми вернемося.
Sweden's Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson was in Kyiv on Wednesday pledging support for Ukraine, but cautions that future military aid would have to be balanced with Sweden's own defence needs. Later, President Zelensky admitted the situation in the direction of Bakhmut is at the moment the hottest, but that the troops were standing firm. Meanwhile, in the town of Pavlovsk in the Donetsk region, 3 civilians were killed and around a dozen more injured following Russian shelling on a 5-storey apartment block.
Russia's costly military campaign in Ukraine has likely significantly depleted Russian equipment and manpower reserves necessary to sustain a successful large-scale offensive in eastern Ukraine, says the Institute for the Study of War. Russia's inability to regenerate expanded mechanized vehicles in the short term further restricts Russian maneuver warfare capabilities. Now, the International Institute for Strategic Studies reported that Russia lost about 50% of its T-72B and T-72B3M tanks. The timely Western provisions of tanks and armoured vehicles to Ukraine would further offset Russia's ability to conduct mechanized warfare as Russia struggles to restart its defence production in the immediate term. Ukraine likely continues to have a window of opportunity to initiate large-scale counter-offensives over the next few months, but its ability to do so likely rests heavily on the speed and scale at which the West provides it with necessary material, particularly tanks and armoured vehicles. Now, the UK Defence Ministry adds that across Russia, the airspace forces likely maintain a largely intact fleet of approximately 1,500 crewed military aircraft, despite losing over 130 since the start of the invasion. It is unlikely that the airspace forces are currently preparing for a dramatically expanded air campaign, as under the current battlefield circumstances, it would likely suffer unsustainable aircraft losses. Overall, Russian air power continues to significantly underperform in the war, constrained by a continued high threat from Ukrainian air defences and dispersed basing due to the threat of strikes against Russian airfields. Russian combat jets operate almost exclusively over Russian-held territory, preventing them from carrying out their key strike role effectively.
Thousands of people are on the streets in Marseille for a 5th-day protest against plans to raise France's retirement age from 62 to 64. Police say that around 1 million people rallied across the country last weekend, although unions put that number closer to 2.5 million. Thursday's protests are aiming to maintain momentum ahead of larger demonstrations on March 7th. Meanwhile, parliamentary debates on the reform are entering their final stretch in the National Assembly. Lawmakers will review the text of the reform starting at midnight on Friday, before sending it to the Senate.
Thank you very, very much.
The president of the World Bank, David Malpass, has announced he will be stepping down almost a year before his term is set to end. He has given no reason for his departure, but his tenure has been controversial. Having previously served in the Trump administration, he has been criticized by politicians and climate activists for his stance on climate change. He is on record for saying he did not know if fossil fuels were driving climate change. The World Bank, a group of 189 nations, lends money to developing countries to help reduce poverty.
Rare footage of the sunken cruise liner the Titanic has been released. The images were taken during a 1986 diving expedition to examine the wreckage of the ship, which sank in April 1912 during the ship's maiden voyage from Southampton, England to New York City. More than 1,500 of the 2,200 people on board died. The unseen footage is timed to coincide with the release of a remastered version of the award-winning blockbuster Titanic.
Have 50 million euros lying around? Well, then you could be the new owner of the oldest known Hebrew Bible. The 1,000-year-old text is going up for auction in New York in May, and its projected sale price could soon make it the most expensive historical document in the world, beating the cost of a first print of the U.S. Constitution that went for around 40 million euros.
What you see behind you is a Bible written over a millennia ago, around the year 900, in the land of Israel or Syria. Before this, portions of the Bible had only appeared in Dead Sea Scrolls. And after the Dead Sea Scrolls, after that period, which ended around the 1st, 2nd century of the Common Era, there are no book forms of the Bible, there's no biblical text until the year 900, the late 9th, early 10th century, when this Bible was written.
The ancient document has previously been owned by private collectors as well as academic and historical institutions. When asked who could be its next buyer, Sotheby's said the list of interested parties was a bottomless pit.